Well, thanks, guys. Like you said, this plan is going to bring huge changes to the tax code if it gets passed, and there's a lot, so I'm just going to get right into it. The most important change is that Trump wants to simplify 7 tax brackets into 3. Now, those rates would be 35, 25, and 12%. Now, those numbers are averages of the old numbers, so this is really big. While that top 1% is seeing a huge 4% decrease in their taxes, you actually see the lowest tax bracket having to pay even more taxes. You do see the upper and lower middle class getting a bit of a decrease, but the one big narrative coming off this bill is that the increase in the lower classes' taxes is compounded by the rich getting this huge tax break. Now, the next big thing to come here is a huge reduction in business taxes. Both the corporate tax and small business tax are reduced by about 15%. That corporate tax would be put below the global average, which can make a lot of businesses want to stay in the U.S. But that is a bit risky. I've seen some estimates that say the reduction will cost the U.S. $1.5 trillion. There's a chance that businesses will make up that difference, but it is risky. The top rate for small businesses would be sent down to 25%, and the Trump administration is working on clauses to make sure that those businesses can't cheat the system for a smaller rate. Some other things the plan does is it doubles the standard deduction. So your first $12,000 of profit go tax-free. If you're a family, that's $24,000. It also eliminates the federal estate tax, something Republicans have wanted for years, and it repeals the minimum tax on the upper class. But the big problem Republicans are facing here is that they don't really have a plan to pay for all these tax decreases. Those costs have to come from somewhere, and Republicans are trying to cut balancing taxes and not increasing the deficit. The plan has no outline to cover the deficits it would create, and that may be the bill's downfall. Republicans have already had problems passing legislation, and this may follow the same pattern. The GOP can only afford 2 defections, and they have to make everyone happy. They have to keep their large tax cuts to keep libertarians like Rand Paul on board, and they need to keep in some key tax breaks to hold on to moderate conservatives like Susan Collins. But their biggest problem may be that they don't have a plan to pay for it. Bob Corker of Tennessee has already said that if the bill adds 1 penny to the deficit, he will vote against it, and many conservatives would likely follow it. Keep an eye on the bill this upcoming week, guys, because this is going to be a big fight, and it could be the fight that makes or breaks Trump.
Now we want to go over to Dan Prager. He's watching the maps all night. Dan, what do the results show so far?
Well, thanks, guys. One of the big surprises of this election really is Florida. We didn't expect all of these votes to come in so quickly. Right now, Trump is up about 1%, but we still have a long way to go with these bottom counties right down here. We have Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach, all super liberal strongholds. Broward has about maybe 200,000 or so more votes to go. Miami-Dade's almost done. They're going heavily for Clinton. Some other surprises in this state, you have up here where you have Jacksonville, usually a pretty conservative area. It went for Romney by about 4 points. Right now, Trump is only holding it by about 1. So that's a pretty big loss for Trump. But in terms of gains, he picked up right over here, right around where Tampa is. It went blue for Obama in 2012. But in this election, it looks like it's going to go red. This is what we're looking at right now. Not a lot of surprises. All of these states are really solidly red or blue. So what we're really going to look at right now is where these close states are going to go and how it relates to 2012 and Obama versus Romney. So if we look at that map where we had in 2012, we would see that Trump really needs one of these Rust Belt states to try and take over and try and win this election. If, by chance, Clinton wins Florida, and I'd say the consensus right now is although he's up, Clinton probably has the advantage there. If she wins Florida, Trump could win states that Obama won in 2012. Let's say 2 of these Rust Belt states, any 2, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Iowa, North Carolina, either New Hampshire or Colorado, and Clinton still wins the race. So it really hinges on Florida. If Trump can pull Florida back, he still has to hope for a win in North Carolina. He still has to hope for a win in one of those states because it looks like Nevada is going blue. He has to win Wisconsin, maybe Michigan, maybe Pennsylvania. So it's kind of a tough road right now already starting for Trump, and he's going to need to get pretty lucky tonight and need to hope for some high turnout among Republicans. Thanks, Alex. Actually, we're going to focus on a couple of states that are really important for both candidates' chances. We're going to start out here with North Carolina, a state that went for Romney. It's one of the few states where Clinton is trying to take from what Romney won in 2012. The main places she's looking at are right in this center area. That's the Research Triangle area. We have Wake County and Forsyth County. Both have Clinton up about like 20 right now, and both broke for Obama by less than 10. So Clinton's making big gains there among educated whites, black vote, some partially the Hispanic vote, and that's making up for a lot of the gains that Trump has made over here on the west side of North Carolina, where it's very rural, very conservative, and he's picking up a lot of votes there because there's a high approval rating of what Trump's been doing in the primary. So actually, let's move on to Pennsylvania now, which is another very important state. I'm actually going to come over this way because what I want to talk about is right in here. This is Philadelphia right over here, and surrounding it are the 4 suburban counties, including Bucks County, which is right up here. That is one of the most important counties in Pennsylvania. All of them are pretty moderate. Bucks and another one, Chester, went only by about a point to Barack Obama. Bucks right now with about 400 votes in, which means very little is leaning toward Trump. Clinton's hoping to make big gains there, which again is going to offset Trump's gains up here in central Pennsylvania. Trump is hoping in coal country, such as places like Luzerne County, which is blue right around here. Luzerne County is probably going to go red because they're coal country. They like Trump's way of talking. He has a very high approval rating there. So we're going to have to watch to see if the suburban and the urban vote in Pennsylvania, which is a big portion of the vote in there and in places like Pittsburgh, can overtake the rural vote in central Pennsylvania. Look at Josh, who's been talking this whole time about these 3 wow counties right in here, Waukesha, Ozaukee, and Washington. And all 3 of them voted for Romney by about 30 to 40 points. Trump is holding with those, and earlier polls said he wasn't going to. So that's another pleasant surprise for the Trump campaign. If Clinton wants to win, she has to improve numbers there, she has to hold in here, and she also has to win Dane County by a solid margin. Dane had record numbers this election in early voting, and they looked poised to give Clinton a solid boost, but who knows now. Next we move on to Michigan, where right now Clinton's only winning about 4 to 5 counties last I checked. Those counties were Detroit, a suburb, Lansing, and Flint. So it's really not looking good for her. All of these counties, Michigan does usually go red in most of their non-urban counties, but all of those counties, all of these right in here, are really going red right now.
What does the map look like?
Well, the map, the Trump campaign is celebrating right now because the map is going exactly the way he had hoped. He was saying since the beginning of his campaign he can swing these blue states, and right now it's looking like he can. Wisconsin and Michigan are looking like they're leaning toward Trump right now. And while there's a lot of vote left, if he wins one of them, he's in very good position. There's not really much of a way for Clinton to win.
You mentioned Michigan and Wisconsin, 2 states that Hillary Clinton needs if she wants to win the 270 for the Electoral College.
Yeah. And actually, I think it was kind of a surprise to see Trump win Florida. Okay. We were hearing these reports about how Broward and Miami-Dade were setting records
this is
for
really remarkable.
high Florida voting,
true.
which has to mean that there is incredibly high turnout among rural white voters, that they're going out and they're voting in huge numbers like we've never seen before.
Dan, if you crunch those numbers, what county made the difference here?
Ooh, what county made the difference? That's a good question. It might be Volusia County. It went pretty solidly for Trump in Florida, and in 2012 it went for Barack Obama. I'd have to look at the maps a little more to give you a
It makes sense.
answer,
Volusia County, you have Steve Shale, prominent Democratic strategist, saying that this is where we have had a problem turning out white working class votes. So that actually would describe a lot of it. But Miami-Dade, where did that fall?
Miami went very solidly Clinton, and in bigger numbers than we've ever seen before. She had these advantages. She had an advantage in Hillsborough County, which I said before was a bellwether and always picked a winner. This is going to be the 2nd time ever that it's picked the loser of the state. So
is it not necessarily a fact that voters didn't turn out for Clinton, but it's more so that voters did turn out more so for Trump?
I mean, it has to be. We don't have the full numbers in yet, but with the incredibly high turnout of Miami-Dade and Broward, it has to be that voters are turning out in those rural areas. So first we're going to look at a state that is lightly red, but it's looking more and more like Clinton may need to win it. We're going to look at Arizona here, where there's really only one critical county, and it's Maricopa County right here. Maricopa is home to Phoenix and Mesa, and it has about half of the votes of the entire state. Right now, Trump is winning it slightly. He's winning Arizona by about 3 or so points. The reason Arizona has become so important is, one, the Hispanic vote there is very large, and Democrats were hoping that they could possibly turn it blue. The Comey letter kind of threw a wrench in that, but now they're hoping again. And also because if she loses Michigan or Wisconsin, Arizona might be her last chance to get back in this. If she loses Michigan and wins Wisconsin, if she wins Arizona, it's back to a tie. If she loses Wisconsin and wins Michigan and wins Arizona, she wins. It's unlikely, but it could happen. She's going to need big Hispanic turnout in Maricopa. All right, moving on to another state that actually looks pretty light blue, we have Nevada, where there's really only 2 critical counties, and both of them are blue on this map. You have Clark County down here, which is home to Las Vegas. Clark got a lot of national media attention, especially on Twitter, after political guru John Ralston said that Hispanic turnout there was incredibly high. That was the first time we really saw that Hispanic turnout was really high. He said that the state would really likely go blue unless there was a crazy amount of turnout among white rural voters. It's home to a large population. I believe 2/3 of the population lives in Clark County. Another one to look at is Washoe County, which is up here, the other blue state. And Washoe County is very swingy. If Clinton wins it, she's got a very good chance in the state. If Trump wins it, his chances improve. If Clinton doesn't win Nevada, it looks like it's all but over for her.
So $54 billion to the military, $1 trillion to infrastructure. He has to make cuts somewhere. Where can we expect these cuts?
Well, he's announced his plans for the military at least, and he said it's coming, a lot of it is going to come from the EPA, from State Department and foreign aid cuts, and really just a slew of domestic programs that he hasn't really been put many specifics into, but a lot of cuts are going to come from there.
So what about the infrastructure ban, $1 trillion and the wall? How do those factor in?
Well, like you said, the wall is another big thing that he's hoping to pay for. And right now, Department of Homeland Security only has about $20 million reserved for the wall.
And
that's going to cost,
say that's at least $10 billion to build the wall.
$10 billion's really like a light
A
estimate,
low
I guess.
ball,
And
absolutely.
the infrastructure plan doesn't really have a cost at this point. We don't know where that money's going to come from. He hasn't laid it out yet, but it's an expensive plan, and the money's going to have to come from somewhere.
And the new information about cuts from the EPA or to the EPA came out today, saying that they're expected to cut 25% of the budget, over 30% of the staff. Now, what impact is that going to have, and what programs is he specifically going after?
Well, he's going to gut the EPA if he has his way. Right now, the cuts are 25% to just programs and 30% to staff. And now that's about $2 billion. He's also cutting 38 distinct programs, including industrial waste, toxic waste, air and water plans. But a lot of the money taken away is from state grants, which is going to really hurt a lot of state environmental projects. So he's following through on his promise to gut the EPA and really take out a lot of money from it.
And if those cuts go through, the EPA is going to be at their lowest number since the 80s and 90s in terms of funding and employment. But looking ahead, so a lot of this money he wants to put towards the military while making cuts here domestically. How does that play into his America First slogan or catchphrase, if you will?
Well, he is following through on all of his promises. He promised to strengthen the military. He promised to bring money in for infrastructure and create jobs and build the wall. So he's following through on all of his promises. It remains to be seen whether or not it will actually get confirmed. The budget is not his alone to confirm. So maybe the Northern Democrats might get mad if that infrastructure plan isn't put in, but he's doing what his constituents voted him in for.
Now, on that, the fact that he does not control the budget, and Senator Lindsey Graham is on record saying that this budget is asking for too much and it is, quote, dead upon arrival. Now, what can we expect in terms of him having to actually work with Congress on that issue?
There is a very little chance that this budget, as he put it out, will go through. Most presidents, when they come into office, put out a really bold proposal knowing that it will get negotiated down. He's got entire opposition from the Democrats. Not a single Democrat will vote for this. A lot of Republicans have spoken out against this bill too. So it's going to get shaved down a lot. Whether or not it gets scrapped entirely or not is something that remains to be seen. But he's got opposition from all sides on this budget. But I think he knew he was going to have that.
Okay, so ISIS, they lost their biggest city, but you're saying that we shouldn't be celebrating. Why?
All right, so this is definitely a good thing and something that needed to happen. The U.S. and the coalition forces have been trying to get in here for a long time. But it's not the end of ISIS, and it's not the end of instability in the region. You're going to see a lot of battles from control of Raqqa, from the government and rebels, to just the future of terrorism as it's shaped from ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and other forces like that. This is not the end. In fact, you're kind of exploding ISIS into a bunch of different pieces, but those different pieces are still active.
So the government and the rebels have been fighting for years at this point. So do we expect that there will be another fight for Raqqa in the future?
Oh, absolutely. Coming up very soon, you're going to see another fight between the rebels and the government, and it's a fight the government is most likely going to win. The U.S. has made it clear, President Trump has made it clear that he does not want any part of nation building in the region, and Russia has kind of taken their pro-Assad forces and have used it to kind of take back Raqqa. Russia is going to be a key player in asserting Assad's dominance over that area.
Now, President Trump has said that ISIS is basically defeated. His advisors are not so sure. I mean, are we going to see ISIS sort of resort back to one of those traditional terrorist groups?
Most likely. Actually, some good news I just saw yesterday. The New York Times had reported that a lot of those former ISIS fighters, there's estimated about 6,500 ISIS fighters around the region, have not necessarily gone back to countries to perform those lone wolf acts of terror. It doesn't mean it's not going to happen, it just means it hasn't happened yet. What people are expecting is just that they're going to spread across the world, they're going to dissolve out of that caliphate that they used to have, and they're going to go commit these acts of terror, and the people they lose in ISIS now that it's defeated are going to go to Al-Qaeda, who's been in the region, the Taliban. There's all of these terrorist groups that are waiting to pick up the areas that ISIS kind of just lost. So it's not really, it's a win, but we'll expect to see a lot of dangerous things in the future.
Well, the story certainly is not ending here. Dan, glad to have you here. Excuse me.
Thank you for having me.
Dan, is the GOP as unified as ever?
Absolutely not. I don't think they've ever been less unified. You see the president attacking moderates in the Senate. As Jeff Flake said he's not the only one in the Senate that feels this way. He's just the one who can talk about it because he's retiring. There's fighting between the president and his own staff. There's fighting between the president and Congress. There's fighting between congressmen. And you see all these people trying to get primaried, and I can't see any semblance of unity in the party right now.
Dan, the timing of this is really poor, too, because we have the 2018 Senate elections right around the corner, and we have some 2017 gubernatorial elections as well with Republican candidates. And this makes the entire party look not unified, as we're seeing with the bickering between Bob Corker and President Trump, between Jeff Flake and President Trump. It's really not a good sign for the Republican Party moving forward, especially with these elections.
I mean, going down the road now, when we look at the midterms, when we look at next year's budget and the plans for what they want to do legislative-wise, how badly is this going to hurt them? What are they going to be able to get done, and what sort of things are off the table now?
I do feel like definitely with the lack of unity, like Dan and Jack you described, in the lead up into the 2018 elections, it doesn't seem like they'll be able to get much done. When they don't have these candidates who are working on a solid platform that like every member of the Republican Party can agree on, what exactly are they running?
Yeah, what do Republicans want? I mean, the typical GOP values, you have lower taxes, lower the deficit, and you see this new tax plan that adds $1.5 trillion to the deficit, and the only real tax cuts are for the super wealthy, the only large ones at least. And you're seeing people like the Freedom Caucus go along with it, who have constantly turned down any deal that increased the deficit. It's kind of like they're selling their souls just for this popularity, just to appease President Trump and the Republican leadership.
Well, when you only have 52 senators in your majority, it's not very difficult to lose that majority when they're voting. Jack, what do you think they need to do to reunify here? I mean, is it up to President Trump to sort of step up and stop, tweeting out, these feuds, or is it on somebody else?
Well, the Republican Party certainly needs leadership, and I think that on the baseline, a majority of Republicans can agree, like Dan was saying, on lower taxes, a strong national defense. These things are core Republican values, and in order to get things done in the Senate, the Republicans need to return to these values and find common ground, and that starts with the president.
But can they? Can they return to those values after what's been going on now? I mean, you see Jeff Flake, he's retiring, but he was getting crushed in his Senate primary polls by a more Trump Republican. You're seeing all these moderates kind of getting booted out of the Senate in favor of these more nationalist, sort of Steve Bannon Republicans. Is there a way to return to that kind of national platform that they used to have under, say, Bush or supposedly McCain?
I do want to play some audio we have of Senator Jeff Flake. After his retirement address, he elaborated a little bit more on why he can't support the current GOP. Let's take a listen.
It's not enough to be conservative anymore. It seems that you have to be angry about it. And the politics of resentment have come into play. And I can't go there.
And what's your reaction?
You know, I agree with him. The politics of resentment kind of seems to be the GOP's national platform under Trump. You're seeing like the strong national defense, lower taxes kind of fall on the back burner behind the build the wall, these culture wars that have been really led by the Steve Bannon and the Mercers. I know we've been talking about this for weeks, and you've been saying that Steve Bannon is the most powerful man in American politics right now. And I mean, at this point, it kind of seems true. Bannon and Trump have the power that no one else has to kind of be the kingmaker in these elections and decide the national platform.